Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of terrifying Dogman, Sasquatch, Cryptid encounters to share with you. Before we get into this, upload a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. Written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first part of the upload. We heard the brush in the hollow below us rattling, and you could tell whatever was making these sounds was rather large. I had with me a Ruger 1022 and approximately 150 rounds of ammo, stacked and ready to go. I could barely make something out coming toward us. I did have the rifle equipped with a night vision scope, and I could make out an outline of what appeared to be a man. Upon further inspection, I found it was not. There were two large walnut trees about 25 feet in front of us, and whatever came from the woods was using these trees for cover. But as it stepped out for what I took as a charge, I opened fire. Within 2.5 seconds, I emptied my first 25-round mag into the creature and was starting on my next. After all was said and done, and 151 rounds was entered into the target, I suggested we start to retreat for the house, about 65 feet behind us. No more ammo in the 22, so I went for my .380 auto that I had as a spare on my leg. The thing that was freaking me out the most was that after all the shooting, 95% of which I know hit it, the creature was weaving back and forth between trees. No screams, no apparent pain, no anything. The creature was approximately 7 to 8 feet tall, about 400 to 500 pounds, covered in a thick black fur. It did in fact resemble the ever-popular Bigfoot image that each and every one of us are quite familiar with, except for the fact that it was slimmer in shape, almost skinny, and it did in fact have a neck, also protruding on either sides of its head. Location of ears were long tapered horns, also black in color. On the top of its head also resided a horn pointing straight up. All horns were approximately 5 to 6 inches in length and were the same dark color as the creature. We finally made it to the house, and after a sleepless night, we got up the next morning to see if we could find anything. All we saw was a lot of spent shell casings between the two walnut trees. There were only about 7 to 8 bullet holes in both of them, meaning I had struck the target numerous times, and the ground looked like it had been danced upon. Upon that, this concludes my true story of how one night I indeed danced with the devil. Upon later inspection, we were shocked to discover that each trap had been sprung, and all the bait had been extracted. Having seen this, we returned home to double-check the traps and to make sure they were set correctly and operating correctly. I was looking for my pre-teenage cousin to be the guinea pig, but after careful consideration, I found a stick that was almost as good. The traps were placed at different locations around the previous activities, and we received the same disappointing results. No further traps were set, but a hike up the easternmost ridge revealed a quite large system of tunnels made of brush and various sizes of tree limb, vines, and leaves. These catacombs were obviously not made by a man as revealed by their construction. They were approximately 2.5 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and were made up to 3 passageways intertwining into a main chamber in the center. When we discovered these, I was convinced that we found the lair of the beast. We all got that same "we are being watched in the woods" feeling and decided rather quickly to return home. Today's second part of the upload, Sussex County, New Jersey. It was about 2 in the morning. My mom went to see my father in the hospital and stayed there for the night. My uncle was babysitting me and my 2 brothers. There was a noise outside of the house, so my uncle got up and went out to see what it was. I heard him, so I followed him. He came back inside and looked white as a ghost. I got my father's .22 caliber pistol and went back outside. I followed again very curiously to see what scared him. The moon was the only light outside, but it was full, so we could clearly see what it was that had scared my uncle. He was shaking and held up the gun. Next to him was a tall, hairy creature with long, dark hair. It was very wide and had a face that almost seemed human/ape-like. My uncle got scared and shot at it. It ran away into the mountains behind our house, hollering and screaming. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up and went inside. I was very afraid and couldn't sleep. I don't know what time it was that the screaming got louder, but when it got dark, we were in the house watching TV. All of a sudden, something hit the house. It was a thudding, pounding sound. As I write this, I get the chills because I remember it like it was yesterday. The noise went around the house. The garbage cans were thrown at the side of the house. That screaming sound again. My brothers and I were sitting on the floor in my room, staring at the window, which was ground level. I was so scared as well as everyone else. We all just stopped breathing out of pure fear. It went on for about 15 minutes. It seemed like forever. Then there was quiet. My mother now believed it was real. It was not over. The next day, we all went to visit my dad in the hospital. When we came home, it was dark. My mother knew now that there was something living in the woods close to our house. So she came in the drive and left the lights on so we could run in the house. On the hill was our pig, Wilbur. My mom was suddenly startled. She saw something in his pen move by him. Wilbur was squealing madly. Then it stood up, and in the headlights of the car, we could really see it. It was very tall, and you could see how strong it was. It looked at us and stepped over the fence like it was nothing. The fence was 4 feet tall. Then we knew if it wanted to hurt us, it could have, but only wanted us to know it was mad for what my uncle had done. So we went to the house and locked the door, and we didn't sleep very well. The next morning we went out to see Wilbur. He had a scratch on his face that was pretty deep, and the pen floor had a couple of muddled tracks. They looked like human tracks, but much wider. It was real, and we had realized it. It was about 2 weeks later when my father came home. They were on the porch with a couple of friends. Our dog was barking, but quickly stopped. We heard something in my dad's garden. My dad got out his flashlight and shined it toward the garden, and there was what looked to be a family of them. 2 bigger ones and a smaller one. They just looked at us. My dad tried to talk to them. They just stayed where they were. They stayed on the porch watching our father trying to communicate with these creatures. No movement was made. So he turned off the light and got back on the porch. After a while, he shined the light by the garden and they were gone. The next morning, my dad called his forest ranger friend to come to the house and see the footprints he had found. He did come and take a look at them. After that, I don't know what happened. They weren't back again and everything got quiet. We lived next to the Appalachia Trail. So, as it is said, the Bigfoot travels it. I will never forget this, because it is a memory that is embedded in my mind. I know what I had seen, and it was real. The sight, the smell, and the sounds that bring a person to believe that there are creatures out there. Today's third part of the upload comes to us from Alberta, Canada. I saw something mysterious 2 times in my life. First, when I was about 9 years old, I was waiting for the bus on the road about 100 yards from my house. I was throwing rocks and waiting patiently for the bus to come up to the hill. As I was looking in the direction of the hill, roughly 200 to 300 yards away, I saw what I thought was a man or a boy running across the road from right to left. At first, I thought it was one of the boys playing tag that lived about a half a mile down the road from where the bus was coming. When I got on the bus, the first thing I asked was if the boys were playing at the top of the hill where I lived, and they said no. Years later, I began to question who would be running across a wooded area that early in the morning, about 7 in the morning. The houses were pretty far apart, and there was plenty of wooded area where I lived. Another time, when I was about 12, 2 friends and I were headed home in a late evening. It was summer, but where I lived in northwestern Alberta, the sun stays up a long time in the summer. We were coming up the hill, and although it was dark, I could still make out shapes in the trees and stuff. We were walking along, and I was on the left-hand side as we were headed in a western direction along a dirt road. We were talking when I noticed something in the ditch to my left. As we were walking by it, I didn't want to look directly at whatever it was. I didn't want to tell the others or scare or panic them or myself. As we walked by, my body was on autopilot as we just kept walking. I looked through the corner of my eye, and I saw what appeared to be something lying in the ditch, very still. It was dark, and the one leg was bent more than the other, as if it was trying to blend in with the grass and darkness. I walked faster, but didn't run because I didn't want whatever it was to chase us. I never told the other 2 friends about it. Maybe they saw it as well. One day I'll ask them. Today's 4th part of the upload. Alberta, Canada, the Alaskan Highway. My uncle and I were going home after visiting some cousins. Suddenly my uncle stopped dead in his tracks. A few dogs of our cousins were giving off a low growl whimper kind of noise as if they couldn't decide what to do. My uncle pointed to 2 figures that I couldn't see. I had to get glasses, and I tried very hard to squint and figure out what my uncle was looking at. He turned as I did to run back to my cousin's place. My uncle was so scared that he jumped over a fair-sized fence while I crawled underneath. Later, my uncle asked me if I saw the figures that he pointed to. I said no. Then he told me what he saw. He saw 2 black figures. One was significantly smaller than the other. They were standing near a house that was approximately between our house and my cousin's house. The dogs came running back to the house as well, not bothering to investigate what these creatures were. There was an old swing that stood in front of the house where the creatures were standing. I'm going to ask my uncle about what exactly it was he saw, and I will ask him about the features of these 2 creatures. I was about 12 and don't remember the fear or feeling of something happening that was surreal. It was hard to describe the emotions. Today's final part of the upload. I was a senior in high school. It was 2011. My group of friends and I were obsessed with haunted, creepy places and things. I think our interest being kids, we lived across the street from an abandoned mental asylum that we would regularly sneak into, so naturally, when we heard about Downingstown Twin Tunnels, we were psyched to go. This place is still on a drivable road. It's 2 attached tunnels with 1 active tunnel and 1 completely grown over with brush and water, kind of like a swamp. They are pretty long and curved, so there is a point in the tunnel where no light can enter, making it pitch black. Legend has it that there has been some deaths and murders there. Supposedly a pregnant woman hung herself from the middle of the tunnels, and years later, in the 90s, there was a woman's body chopped up and found stuffed in a suitcase, which was placed in the tunnels. So, according to folklore, if you walk through the tunnels at night, you emerge from the other end with scratches on your arms. Or, if you drive through it, as we did, we could hear the feet of the suicidal pregnant woman dangling on top of the car. So we go, and I'm driving. We drive through a few times, park in the middle, turn the lights off. We actually turned the car off and rolled down the windows to wait to see what would happen. It was a bust at first, and since I was driving, I'm ready to call it a night, but my friend eagerly says, "One more try." So that's what we did. I park in the middle and turn the lights and car off and sit there silently waiting for something to happen again. Now, since it's still an active tunnel, I remind you I have my key in the ignition ready to be turned on an instant, so that if a car comes speeding down, I can quickly turn the car on and flash the lights to let them know that we're there. So I'm staring at the mouth of the tunnel when all of a sudden we see a dark figure walk across the mouth of the tunnel. I'm amazed, mind you, almost don't believe it until it turns into the tunnel and starts directly walking towards a car. I can only describe it as an extremely tall humanoid figure with broad shoulders, long arms that dangled almost to its knees, and a rectangular-shaped head with no distinguishing features, just completely black. At this point, it's getting closer, and I'm so freaked out that I instinctively turn the car light on. The lights are flashing, and the thing vanishes. I immediately turn to my friend, and he says, "Did you see that?" And I replied, "Yeah." Although it feels nice to have another person validate what I saw, it has completely left me uneasy for years. Today's bonus, part of the upload. Meaty Bemp's Howler, Washington County, Maine. Hello, we used to live in Baileyville, Maine, but we moved to Millinocket. We thought you'd like to know about this story. We had dinner over Thanksgiving 2006 with a group of 60 or more friends and relatives who lived over by Meaty Bemp's, Maine. This happened in Washington County, Maine. There was this couple down the long Thanksgiving table from us, from Woodland Junction, who had driven down with their elderly mother and their aunt, both widows with some standing in their respective communities over there on the Indian Township. That's about all I know of them. I don't know how it started the conversation, as I got into it after it started. Everyone was eating, the table was growing quiet, and I heard the word used that got my attention. Meaty Bemp's Howler. The two older ladies, I never got their names, there was too many people, were telling about when they were little girls. They went with their parents over to Meaty Bemp's Lake to fish for some smallmouth bass. Evidently, the family went often. They were poor, didn't have fancy camp gear, slept under the stars, unafraid with their parents and uncle. They went on recalling how those were the days, and said, as young girls, had a favorite rocky island in the lake where they thought the fishing was best, and sometimes they would sleep at this little place in order to get first light fishing in real early, except when this howler thing started calling across the lake. Then, as it happened, either the uncle or their father would canoe out and collect them from the rocky outcrop. They explained the howling was more like a monotonous singing from someone with a husky voice, but it was called the howler. They said that for a long time they didn't know what the howler was, and that as children they just went where they were told until one day they were left alone on the rocky island, and the adults went quite a distance out onto the lake to fish another area. The one lady remembered they had 2 biscuits left from breakfast, some worms and crickets to fish with until mid to late afternoon. The older of the ladies interrupted and told about once when their parents didn't get back before sunset. The howler started singing again, anxious for their parents to return. She said the 2 tied up 3 smallmouth bass on market string, placed them in the bucket of water, then waited and worried. The howling grew louder, and then she said it got quiet suddenly. The 2 girls looked around behind them, and there stood 2 giant Indian dripping wet. She said the giants stared down at them, and then reached over and took their catch. The bigger one walked over to the smaller giant and handed the fish to one. The lady telling the story was gesturing with her hands. Then the black giants went into the water and swam away with the fish. This man sitting across the table from them, the two Indian ladies, asked how big the giants were, and they said 2 fathers high. The one lady said that 2 fathers high giants were covered with black shiny hair, and both giants were dripping wet, and had huge hairy black hands with fingers as big as the fish they caught. They had big feet and had no clothing. At the recollection, the 2 ladies covered their mouths and snickered. When the parents finally came in with the canoe to pick the girls up, they were not surprised at their story and told them that the Meaty Bemp's howler, who was known to steal fish and sometimes little girls, had visited them. After that, the girls were left at the campground area and never fished alone again. In fact, the one lady said they never went back to their favorite rocky island to fish again. The description seemed close enough to Bigfoot to write about this. If there were other reports from this area, I don't know what year or years the Metabumps howler was around, but the 2 Indian ladies had gray hair and looked close to be the age of 80. For some reason, 1942 comes to mind. Maybe the ladies said that was the year. Not sure at this point. Then after that, while we were eating dinner, another fellow said he had heard there was a family of those hairy giants seen crossing Stud Mill Road north of Lower Sabo Lake in far northern Maine a few years ago. That sighting was made memorable because the hairy giant was carrying a horseshoe hare by the ears that was alive. It was still kicking and squealing. We think there were more Bigfoot stories just like this from up here. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I love stories like this. All of them. I'm kind of planning on asking Lon Strickler and Dark Waters to come on the show, all 3 of us, and kind of do like a paranormal roundtable. Well, excuse me, don't want to copyright check it. An actual, real cryptozoologist study table. That's what we'll call it. Because as far as I'm concerned, besides Coonbow, Dark Waters, my friend, and Lon Strickler, my other friend, are 2 of the most in tune with the field and have a lot to offer, and I think we could really have a pretty good discussion. So I'm going to reach out. I'm hoping maybe we can get together this week sometime. Probably after Monday. I really don't know what's going to happen the rest of the weekend. My dad is now waiting for surgery on Monday, so I really wanted to get something out to you guys tonight. I might not be able to tomorrow because I've got to sit with him for a while when my mom goes somewhere, but hopefully I can get something recorded. Maybe I'll do it later tonight. That way you guys have a show for tomorrow night. But yeah, I've got some pretty good plans for this month that I'd like to do. So I really want to get some good people in and just discuss theory or scientific fact. And a couple of stories that really don't make sense that are cruising around YouTube right now. So, yeah, anyway. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload, and thank you very much for all your support, guys. You guys make this channel happen. See ya.